Welcome to another Q&NE layout expansion update. In our last update, we had a bit of a mixed bag of different updates, but the primary one being that we had started ballasting and we got the main line done and the lead up to the yard done as well. In this update, in addition to showing how all the ballasting is now completed, we will also take a look at some specific areas where we had challenges or changes that need to be made to make way for the next stage in the layout development, the addition of roadways. One of those challenges was creating a tunnel liner just beyond the tunnel portal. And I had these tunnel liners made probably 20 plus years ago from a Woodland Scenics mold. I just hadn't used them. And I thought this would be nice if I could look through the tunnel portal and see a bit of rock walls rather than just bare plywood. I think the challenge here is obvious. The height of the tunnel liners is greater than the space I had between the mainline track and the underside of the plywood sub-road bed above. My first thought was to just cut off a piece of the bottom vertical sections and that would be it. But I quickly realized that that would lower the ceiling to the point where the taller cars wouldn't fit through. I needed to remove about 3/4 of an inch of height, but I only had 1/4 of an inch of ceiling that could be dropped before the tunnel liner would block the opening of the tunnel portal. After cutting about 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch off the bottom of the liners, I reassessed against the height of the plywood sub-road bed. I figured I could just about make it fit and slide under the plywood if I took that 3/8 of an inch off the top curved sections. This was a manual shaving, very slow working, so as not to crack the casting. I had to do this twice, one on each side. There were quite a few cycles of shaving, test fit, shaving, test fit, shaving, testing again, till it finally fit. Once I was satisfied in the positioning and fit, I traced a line along the bottom edge of the liners. I then traced the edge of the footings of the tunnel portal so that ballasting could be completed through the portal and alongside the tunnel liner lines. As I got into ballasting the main body of the yard, I quickly realized that I was going to use a hell of a lot of ballast to fill the deep spaces between each of the tracks. Fortunately, I had lots and lots of leftover coarse material from when I was sifting my limestone dust that I used to fill in the spaces up to the top of the cork road bed, and then came along with the actual ballast on top of that. I took my time working in small 2-foot wide sections because really it was 8 feet wide. There were 4 tracks across, plus I had probably about 2 turnouts in every 2-foot section. So it was best to concentrate slowly and get it done. The gap you see here in the ballast is where I was planning, or I am planning, to have a roadway come across one end of the yard. I'll have more to say about that later in this video. The very last turnout on the yard lead is remotely controlled with a tortoise underneath, and so there's a 3/8 inch or 1/2 inch hole through the sub-road bed, which of course makes ballasting difficult. So I had to take extra care to prevent the ballast from slipping through the hole while I was trying to place it between the adjacent ties, and also while the glue dried. I wanted to make sure that ballast and glue didn't fall below onto the tortoise. The tail end of the yard lead passes through the wall and lands underneath the refrigerated warehouse on the other side of the layout. So I wanted to make sure that there was some ballast that passed through the wall so that when you're viewing it from the side of the mill, even though it's dark inside the building, it doesn't look like the ballast abruptly stops. Of course, I had to remove the refrigerated warehouse to do this, but I also took the opportunity to paint the area black so there's no reflection and it will look really dark after everything's put back in place. I had been thinking about this fix for some time. I didn't like how close to the edge of the layout the slurry tank car unloading spur was. And so I moved it over another inch or so there's a good 2 inches of clearance to the edge of the layout. One of the other areas that I was scratching my head about was the long track that runs along the mill building where I added an unloading door for scrap paper, recycled paper. It's also the same track that runs in between the buildings in that dark alleyway through the backdrop. I was wondering whether this would be paved or with exposed ballast. And this is because the entire area in front of it is the tractor trailer loading area, so it'd be a huge paved area anyway, and I thought, well, why not just take it up to the wall of the building? In the end, I decided not to pave over the tracks because at the far right, I would end up having to raise the asphalt level, which means the loading dock doors would have to be higher, and that would mean that the entire building would have to be raised. This would make the loading or unloading door for the scrap paper much too high compared to the floor of the boxcars. While we're on the subject of the narrow alleyway, I took the opportunity, when I had the building off the layout, to add some hazard striping and a no clearance sign. Both of these decals came from the Magic Pan Bakeries kit. With ballasting practically completed, it's time to move on to the next phase of our layout building, and that is the arrangement, placement of roadway crossings and roadways between the crossings across the entire expanded layout area. The first major area of interest is this crossing of the access route to the paper warehouse that runs across all the yard trucks at one end, as well as the slurry tank car track. Rule number one is never to assume that what you've designed on paper will actually work properly when you build it to full scale. It quickly became obvious that a full 90-degree bend in this roadway just wasn't going to work for tractor trailers trying to pass each other on a fairly narrow road. Even a 45-degree bend was problematic. As you can see from these photos of trucks trying to make the turn, they would be swinging into the opposite lane and the tail end of the trailers would be clipping the corners of the curve. Similar issues at the other end of the crossing, the 90-degree bend heading into the paper warehouse, where trucks would have to swing out wide to get onto the road and then block incoming traffic, made me consider a fully angled road with no bends at all. While this would remove most of the issues with the truck movements, it would result in having to pave over a switch frog and guardrails. In the end, I settled on a compromise that tried to make the best of both worlds. It's an angled road crossing to help the truck movements with a slight bend to clear the frog on the first turnout of the crossover. This also allows me to maintain the 4-car capacity on the tank slurry spur. The widest roadway I could fit in between the constraints of the two frogs of the crossover is 3¼ inches. That works out to a little more than 23.5 feet in HO scale, which should be good enough for two rigs to pass each other slowly. If you look closely though, you'll see that this requires the tips of the guardrails to be embedded in the crossing. A fair compromise. I would have loved to have 3.5 inches or 24 feet on all my crossings, roadways on the layout, but there just isn't the room for it. Luckily, the internal roadways in the mill complex aren't necessarily as heavily trafficked as the main crossing from to and from the paper warehouse. So in these areas, especially where there aren't curves, I settled on 2.5 inches or roughly 18 feet, which still gives you 2 9-foot lanes. Perhaps a challenge with very large rigs with big mirrors extending on both sides, but I'm not expecting tractor trailers to be on these roadways. And nevertheless, for good measure, I did use a tractor trailer and one regular flatbed truck to test the space available. And the pinch point is what you see here, where the head blocks of the turnouts extend into the roadway. I didn't know the lengths of these head blocks when I designed the layout, so clearly there needs to be some trimming to allow for a full 2.5 inches. I was midway through ballasting when I came to this realization, so only one of the head blocks is fully ballasted. The other still had the exposed cork, and it was a simple matter of cutting across or through the head blocks to maintain that 2.5 inch spacing. I cut back the length of the ties about 3/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch beyond the 2.5 inches that I needed, because I wanted to put back the end parts of the head block ties that had the cross piece. And here's a look at the almost finished work where the ballast has been removed, but just before having glued the ties back in place. Well, it's been 18 months exactly since I first teased the idea of an expansion of the Quebec and New England layout. Since that time, we have chronicled the planning, the benchwork construction, the track laying, wiring, the control panels, the fascia, valance, and backdrop. We've kit-bashed a significant number of major buildings for the mill complex, and even taken a stab at some light weathering. We've covered portal camouflage and started a bit of the scenery for the mainline cut that runs down to the hidden staging helix. And most recently completed all of the ballasting on the layout and begun thinking about what the roadways are going to look like. So what does all this mean for this video series? I guess it means a lot of the heavy lifting is done, and from here going forward, it's scenery, more buildings, detail work. I'll still try and make one of these update videos once a month, but there may be less content, only because the pace might slow down a bit. Nevertheless, I hope you do continue to watch and enjoy whatever it is I will publish, and of course, your comments and questions are always welcome. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoy layout improvement videos, here are a few others that you may find interesting. If you're not already a subscriber, you can click on the logo on the top right-hand corner of your screen.